The city was still cloaked in mist as the clock ticked past 7:42 a.m. The first pale streaks of April sunlight glinted faintly on the glass facade of Horizon Tower, reflecting off the steady stream of cars crawling along Whitmore Avenue. A sleek black Range Rover came to a quiet stop at the red light on 5th Street. Inside the vehicle sat a black woman in her early 40s white blouse, deep navy blazer, sunglasses, and her hair neatly tied back. There was no music, no phone in hand. She simply sat still, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes fixed forward so calm it felt almost distant. 3 cars back, a police SUV idled at the curb. Behind the wheel was Officer Chad Millen, a former Marine, now a senior officer with the South Ridge County Police Department. He sipped from a battered paper coffee cup, the other hand casually adjusting the volume on the police radio, which was broadcasting a report of a convenience store robbery. His gaze drifted over the cars ahead, until it landed on the black Range Rover. Something about the woman inside didn't sit right with him, not because she had done anything wrong, but because of the car, the tailored clothes, the poised demeanor. It just didn't look like someone who belonged here. His mind concluded without hesitation. He grabbed his radio. Unit 217, run a plate check on 8Q17LZ1. Black SUV, female driver, suspicious. 217. What's suspicious? The dispatcher asked. Chad hesitated for half a second, then replied coldly. New car. This area's had multiple reports of imported car thefts. I'll keep it low-key, without waiting for confirmation. Chad hit the gas, flicked on his blinker, and pulled ahead, flipping the siren briefly to signal the driver to pull over. She complied immediately, gliding the car smoothly to the curb like someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Chad stepped out, hand instinctively resting near his holstered gun. He tapped on the driver's window. The woman rolled it down slowly, her eyes, hidden behind dark lenses, didn't blink. Good morning, Chad said. Is this your vehicle? She didn't answer right away. Then softly, yes. May I see your registration and license, please? She nodded, reached into her bag, and handed them over. Everything checked out. But Chad wasn't interested in the paperwork anymore. In his mind, every explanation she could offer was already disqualified by a bias carved as deep as a battlefield scar. Someone like her doesn't drive a car like this unless it's borrowed, stolen, or paid for by someone else. He gestured sharply. Step out of the vehicle, please. Is there a problem? Officer, she asked, voice steady. Out of the vehicle, Chad repeated, more firmly. I suspect this car is tied to a theft reported last night. I need your cooperation. She let out a quiet sigh, not sharp, not frustrated, just calm, as if evaluating the situation like a service review. Then, she opened the door and stepped out. Her composure was so serene, it made a woman being detained on the street look like she was simply conducting a customer experience check. Chad turned her around and yanked her hands behind her back. No explanation, no warning. The snap of cold metal around her wrists cracked through the quiet morning like a slap. A woman walking by stopped and pulled out her phone. What the hell are you doing? She wasn't resisting. Chad didn't respond. He marched the woman to his squad car, opened the rear door, and pushed her in. Evelyn Monroe's face showed no panic, only silence. The kind of silence that felt like she was taking notes in a mental notebook Chad didn't even know existed. Southridge Police Headquarters. 8:19 a.m. in Interrogation Room 3 still hummed with the dull glow of a flickering fluorescent light left on from the night before. Faint coffee stains marked the metal table. No one had bothered to clean them. Officer Chad Millen pushed the door open and shut it hard behind him, as if the sound alone might make the woman across the table fall in line. Evelyn Monroe sat perfectly upright, hands on her lap, back straight, her eyes fixed on the wall clock as if she were observing time itself, not the officer across from her. "Want to tell me your name?" Chad began, sliding a report folder onto the table as he sat down across from her. Evelyn turned to look at him and gave a slight nod. "Dr. Evelyn Monroe," she said, each word pronounced with precise calm, like a verdict being read. Chad jotted it down, lips tightening. He hated women like her, too composed, too quiet. Not angry, not defensive. As if she knew something he didn't. As if she were waiting for him to hang himself with his own rope. "Doctor." "Huh." Chad squinted. "What field? Sociology, public policy, and criminal justice systems?" She replied without blinking. "Harvard, class of 2005. Chad let out a dry laugh. "Impressive." She said nothing more. Didn't ask why she'd been arrested. Didn't demand a lawyer. Didn't even glance at her phone. Just silence. In the surveillance room. Officer Torres, only 2 years on the force, watched the scene on a grainy black and white monitor. His brow furrowed. Something felt off. She didn't look like a suspect from the way she spoke, sat, breathed. Everything about her made the room feel like a bowstring pulled too tight. He turned to Sergeant Miller. "Is Chad really sure she's a suspect in a car theft?" Miller shrugged, then shook his head. "You know, Chad, all he needs is the smallest reason to make the biggest mistake." Back in the interrogation room, Chad kept pressing with invasive questions. "Who's the car? Registered to? Where do you live? Who can confirm your identity?" Evelyn answered each one calmly. No defiance, no submission. Each reply, measured and direct, was like a brick stacking into a wall of composure that slowly made the air feel thinner on Chad's side of the table. "Where do you work?" Chad asked, flipping the pages of his report book. "City Hall?" She answered. "Doing what?" His tone grew rougher. Evelyn didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into the inner pocket of her blazer and pulled out a small piece of paper. She placed it gently on the table, plain white, no logo, no seal. Just a single line of printed text: Evelyn Monroe, Ph.D., Commissioner of Police, Southridge Precinct. Appointment effective Monday, April 10, 8:00 a.m. Chad read it, then read it again. And a third time his hand trembled slightly. He couldn't bring himself to look up. In the surveillance room, Torres stepped away from the screen, holding his phone. His voice was quiet, but it stopped Sergeant Miller cold. "The mayor's on the line. They want to know if we're detaining someone named Evelyn Monroe." Miller went pale. Inside the interrogation room, Evelyn remained seated, hands gently folded. Chad, the seasoned officer, who once prided himself on reading people, now sat in silence. His hands resting awkwardly on his knees, eyes hollow, like a man just stripped bare. He no longer heard the background noise of the station. Only one thought echoed like a hammer inside his head. "Commissioner, she's your boss now, Chad." 47. A.M. Southridge Precinct. The station fell into a strange silence. No alarms, no stomping boots, just an eerie stillness, as if someone had sucked the air out of a building full of men used to barking orders. In the mid-level conference room, Chief Douglas closed the door behind him and turned to face the 3 men seated around the table: Officer Chad Millen, Officer Torres, and Sergeant Miller. On the table lay a fax from the mayor's office, an official appointment of Dr. Evelyn Monroe as the new police commissioner of Southridge Precinct. Effective A.M. today. Douglas's voice was tight. She had been in office for 47 minutes before Chad Millen dragged her out of her car and slapped handcuffs on her like a common criminal. Torres lowered his head. Miller furrowed his brow. Chad didn't move. He stood still, as if the words had landed like a silent death sentence. "You're suspended immediately," Douglas said flatly. Chad nodded. No words, no argument, no desk pounding. No indignation, just silence. That night, Chad Millen sat in his second-floor apartment in the crumbling Little Creek neighborhood. The ceiling was stained from years-old water damage. The ceiling fan clacked as it spun unevenly above him. On the table, an untouched glass of whiskey. And the 6 p.m. news segment no one wanted to rewatch. New Police Commissioner Evelyn Monroe begins her term, quietly declines all media interviews. Sources say she plans a 90-day internal reform of the Southridge Police Department. Chad sat upright, poured the drink, and let it sit. He turned the TV on, then off, then on again. Off. Finally, he threw the remote across the room. In his mind, nothing remained but the image of the woman from that morning, silent in the interrogation room, unmoved, unshaken, and yet powerful enough to bring the entire building to a halt. He didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it again. The flash of cold metal around her wrists, her slight furrowed brow. And Torres's words echoing like a funeral bell. "She's the commissioner. She's your boss. Chad." 3 days later, a letter arrived from the Internal Affairs Review Board. No threats, no raised voices. Just video footage. Body cam recordings. They captured everything: the disdain in Chad's voice, the false authority in his commands, and the sharp click of handcuffs locking around a woman he never even asked to identify herself. And that's when the new silence began. Chad stopped answering calls, ignored every message. He quit going to the gym, the corner bar, the usual weekend dinners with old colleagues. Because no matter where he went, someone always said it. "Hey, you heard about Chad, the guy who cuffed Commissioner Monroe." 1 week later, in the supermarket, Chad locked eyes with an elderly black woman near the produce section. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her stare made him turn around and abandon the cart on the spot. That night, he opened the drawer, pulled out a resignation letter he had written the day he was suspended, still unsigned. He picked up the pen, then set it back down, and leaned against the wall, staring at nothing. Because what crushed him now wasn't the suspension, wasn't the loss of pay. It was the question rising up inside him like a flood. Many times have I done this before. How many people have I pulled from their cars, without even asking their names? How many tired, frightened eyes did I interpret as defiance? And for the first time in 16 years of wearing a badge, Chad Millen was afraid of himself. 1 month later, Southridge sat under a heavy sky. Gray clouds blanketed the city's beltway. It was early summer, but the chill in the air clung like winter, refusing to let go. Chad Millen stood beneath a rusting aluminum overhang, wearing a temporary security guard uniform, just a contract gig, in the parking lot behind City Hall. No gun, no badge fatigue, no authority. Just a middle-aged man handing out parking slips and directing traffic for municipal employees. Each time the gate opened, he bowed his head, not because protocol required it, but because he no longer had the strength to look anyone in the eye. That morning, a motorcade of black SUVs rolled in, government insignias faintly visible on the doors. The lead vehicle stopped right in front of Chad's post. The window rolled down. A familiar face. Evelyn Monroe. No sunglasses. No driver. She was behind the wheel. No expression. Her eyes settled on him. Not with surprise. Not with contempt. Not even pity. Just a profoundly human gaze. Chad froze. His legs felt nailed to the cold concrete. Evelyn said nothing. She tilted her head just slightly, a quiet nod of acknowledgement. He opened the gate. The SUV passed through slowly. No sirens, no music, no screeching tires. Chad turned his face away, but couldn't stop the tightness that gripped his chest. Every heartbeat thudded against a dignity he'd long since forfeited. 2 days later, Evelyn Monroe returned this time to lead a strategic meeting on the city's police reform initiative. After the meeting, she exited through the main lobby where Chad now stood beside a vending machine. Eyes down, posture small. "Mr. Millen." The voice startled him. He looked up. For the first time, they spoke, as two human beings. Chad started, but the words caught. Evelyn looked him in the eye. No flinching, no waiting for excuses. Chad swallowed, then said, his voice low, uneven. "I'm sorry, not because you're the commissioner, but because I never imagined someone's eyes could haunt me the way yours have." Silence. Evelyn didn't nod. She didn't reply right away. Then softly, slowly, she said, "I don't need your apology. But maybe the others you treated like me, they never got to hear one." Chad bowed his head, not to her title, but because he couldn't bear to meet that gaze again. "I understand," he murmured. Evelyn turned and walked away steady, unhurried, not proud, but leaving behind a silence as weighty as a sentence passed. That night, Chad opened his old laptop and logged into the department's internal complaints system. He began to search through the names, those he'd pulled from cars, those he'd cuffed, those he'd stopped without cause. He didn't know if any of them still lived in Southridge. He didn't know if anyone cared to hear an apology. But for the first time in 17 years, wearing a uniform, he wanted to remember, not erase. 3 months later, Southridge had changed. Not with iron-fisted crackdowns or dramatic declarations on the evening news, but through the small things. Some longtime officers quietly resigned. Names once deemed untouchable were suddenly under investigation, and every Monday morning, Police Commissioner Evelyn Monroe held closed-door meetings with the Internal Oversight Board. No cameras, no press, no statements. In town, whispers began to spread. She doesn't speak much, but wherever she goes, the truth comes out. Meanwhile, Chad Millen lived like a shadow. No more bars, no more police radio. He now worked in a northern warehouse counting pallets, sticking labels, stacking boxes. His hands ached from the cold, his shoulders from time, but his heart wasn't frozen anymore. Sometimes he'd open his email, begin typing out an apology, then delete it. Write it again, then erase it once more. Not because he needed to send it, but because he needed to remember that he still owed something. One day, while waiting in the checkout line at a grocery store, Chad noticed a black man step forward. Work shirt, hard hat tucked under his arm, a sleeping toddler resting on his shoulder. Chad stepped back, letting him go first. The man glanced at Chad and gave a small nod. No words, no recognition. But something in that look made Chad want to cry, not because he was forgiven, but because, for the first time, he felt worthy of being seen as human again. On a crisp autumn day, Chad passed by City Hall. His old habits drew him toward the fallen officers' memorial. Near the base of the stone monument, a new bronze plaque had been installed. It read, "Justice is not a siren. Justice is the gaze we cannot look away from." Evelyn Monroe. Police Commissioner Chad stood there a long while. He placed his hand on the cold metal. No one else around, no one watching. But inside him, a trial was quietly coming to an end. No lawyers, no defense. And the sentence wasn't prison. It was to keep living, to remember, to repay, and never repeat. Southridge got better, not because people got fired, but because, for the first time in its history, the system had to look in the mirror, and it couldn't pretend it was clean. Up on the 3rd floor, Evelyn Monroe still arrived at 700 from me every morning. No personal assistant, no entourage. On her desk sat 3 things: a cup of black tea, a stack of internal reports, and a photograph slightly worn, a woman in handcuffs, standing in the street, her eyes staring straight into the camera, not with fear, not with hatred, Just a single, silent question. Do you really think you are who you pretend to be? Not everyone stands trial in court, but all of us stand trial, in our own conscience, and some verdicts quiet. Without appeal, without mercy, we carry for life.